We have new cycles starting in all of our TTT athlete programs starting on October 24th. To get a full cycle overview plus a free sample week, go to trainingthinktank.com. And we cut that. You know what I mean? Today we have the one and only Kyle Habdo on. I've been looking forward to this.
Yeah, me too.
For two reasons. One, I heard that you were complaining like, what the heck, man? Why haven't I been on the podcast? And then number two, because I love talking about movement. And I feel like all of our conversations have been really fruitful. And it's neat to have someone on staff that thinks about movement in both a quote unquote scientific way, but also in an artful way, thinking about like everyone's experiences is slightly different. And then also like movement patterns can always change from sport to sport or for performance reasons, and figuring out maybe different pathways as opposed to it always being like this dogmatic approach.
Yeah. I've tried to really like expand my own knowledge and like how to like help other people overcome those things, because I've been pretty gifted in like my own like ability to move my body and like challenge, I guess, like range of motion. So trying to help other people like Meg, your athlete who's been struggling with like overhead and front rack and like wrist problems. So like helping her and like seeing the changes that she's actually having right now, and like her front rack looks so crazy and so good.
Yeah.
And it's wild. She's like, I've never cleaned the barbell. It's never felt that good. And I was just like, well, hopefully like we continue that progress and like you can keep making those changes to your body. It's awesome.
I think the cool thing about someone like her or anybody that's in a sport like CrossFit where movement's so important is you realize even more how important it is when you can actually get into a good position. And you're like, wait, I can clean that and it doesn't hurt, or it's way easier to pull the barbell off the ground, you know? And most people, I think, especially in the sport of CrossFit, are always like, I just need to lift heavier. They're like, maybe there's like a different pathway to make this even easier first. And it's not even about strength. It's more about just getting the quality of movement that's needed to be able to express, you know, whatever that movement may be.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about how you got into it, because that's where I wanted to start. And then I actually want to dive into your thought about like how you assess movement. I think that's pretty important.
Okay.
Well, let's say Kyle is a PT. Yes. Yeah, I don't think we've said that yet.
No. Yes, I am a PT. I mean, I went to school for a lot of things. So my pathway of getting here was long. I went to school for an English degree, then I did natural science, health science, then I took a master's in biomedical science, and then I got my doctorate in physical therapy. And through that process, I had met a physical therapist. His name is Chris Nentars, and he lives in Buffalo, and he's working out of the school that I got my doctorate at. And he really opened my eyes to what movement could be and how it should be evaluated and how it should be, I guess, processed with people. It wasn't so like dogmatic. It was very like, well, let's just like watch this person move, and then we can kind of make some assumptions, and then we can try to start to change things. And he had like archetypes that he thought about when he saw people and evaluated them, and then like things that he wanted to do with them or lead them to help change their movement patterns, whether they were runners or CrossFitters or whatnot. So I learned so much from him, and that was probably, I don't know, 7 years before I had even like thought about going to PT school or like had started the process of PT school. He owned the CrossFit gym that I came from, or partly owned it. So I met him. I started working with him for my own like injuries and ailments, and then I started learning about CrossFit through him, and then I started going to the gym, and I started coaching. So all these things started happening at once, and like that was like my first like real introduction into like, how do you look at movement, how do you change movement, and how do you start to like help people get out of injury and then help them go forward and get back to sport.
Usually you hear that story and it's like, I had the issue myself, and so then I became passionate about it. Is that the process that you went on, or was it more just because of his mentorship that you became passionate about movement in itself? Yeah,
I played soccer through basically my entire life and into college. And then in my first year of playing soccer, I got hurt, and I had like a sports hernia, which basically meant like they didn't know what was wrong with me, and I was just hurt and I couldn't run. And a bunch of doctors were just like, hey, like running's just not your thing anymore. Soccer's not your thing anymore. Do something else. And I was like, all right, made some peace with that. I went and saw a bunch of different physios or physical therapists, and it was all very basic. Nothing like they did helped me. So I just accepted it, and I like went to the gym. I started doing bodybuilding and some powerlifting, and that's kind of like, that was like my transition into the gym. And as that was happening, I had met this guy, Chris, and he looked at me and was like, I'll have you running in 3 months.
How old were you at that time?
23.
Okay.
23, I think. And he said it with such confidence that I was like, all right, like
even if he was lying, you believed it.
I was like, if you're even
He's the
lying,
guru.
I was like, I'm gonna give it a go, and like we'll just try it out and see what happens. And I think literally to the day, he had me sprinting and running like a 1 mile. It's like time trial,
awesome.
In the parking lot of that gym, and I was just like, what we did was not. It wasn't groundbreaking. It wasn't crazy. It wasn't like anything like new or exciting. It was just like he watched me move, and he was very mindful about the way that he gave me exercises and prescribed exercises and like coached me through it. And I was like, this is just different. I've never watched someone do this before. And I don't know what this is, but like I want to know more. And that was like probably my first introduction to this.
Yeah. So I'm going to give two experiences. These are anecdotal, but still in general. College, broke my leg, and obviously had the surgery. Go to the first PT appointment, and they said, most likely you'll never play football again. This is my junior year of college. And I was just like, I'm not going to accept that. And obviously went through and played, but I was like broken. Okay. So obviously didn't have a good experience there. Fast forward 10 years. This was like 2.5 years ago. I get in a car accident, mess up my knee, have surgery. The PT, the first time I'm there, PT pulls out this book and says, okay, what do we do for meniscectomy? Yeah. And basically just follows a script. And it was the same thing every time for 12 straight weeks. That has put such a bad taste in my mouth for the physical therapy world. But I've met people like you, or I've met other friends that do it, that are in that space, that like are thinking outside of the box. And I feel like maybe it's just the experience that I had that makes me feel this way, or is that just normal in that space?
I think your experience is normal. I think that's probably what like 90% of people go through. And I think that's why physical therapy is seen as such like a like low level, like unnecessary like thing, or like this thing that you have to like do in order to go get an MRI or go get surgery. Like they're like, oh, well, I have to do physical therapy first, kind of like get like check the boxes off so I can move forward. And I mean, I remember when I came up here and you were talking about going to that PT and what you were doing. And I was like, yeah, that's not like the level of athlete that you are, or just human being that you are versus what you're doing is just so low level. Like there's a time and place for some of those things, but if you've only been doing that and it's never gotten progressed, what are we doing? Right.
Well, the thing is too, is, and this is maybe a different topic, but I was stuck in that PT clinic because of insurance purposes. Right. So the way that the healthcare system works here in the United States is I had surgery by this certain doctor, and the only way to get it covered was to go to his PT. And that's how obviously they make money, because it's all in-house. Right. But I had to have 12 sessions with him, or insurance wouldn't cover the sessions or the surgery. And so that whole process, I felt like I was wasting an hour of my time every single Tuesday when I showed up there at 1 p.m. But it is what it is. Like I just don't know. When people do that and then that's what they expect, like where else can they go? Like what are the resources that someone should have to be able to figure out movement on their own?
Yeah. Man, that's hard. I think part of the thing now, I guess it's good and it's bad that social media is such a huge thing that you can go on to Instagram or YouTube and type in like physical therapists, and you can find a ton of people and a ton of resources. There are better physical therapists out there, just like there's bad physical therapists out there. And like the spectrum just ranges. How you evaluate and critically think about like those people that you're following, and if they're like giving good information, that can vary from not the thing that you went through to kind of the thing that I do. It's hard. Like you just kind of have to watch them and follow them along and just like make, I don't even know like what the right thing is. Like have good, I don't know, make good options or good choices based on what they're putting out. There's a bunch of people that I follow on Instagram because I really think that what they're doing is good. And there's some people that I follow or have unfollowed because of the things that they're putting out is just like not good information. And I don't want to say fear mongering, but like trying to like make a niche for themselves unnecessarily. So like, how do you go about finding those people? I think it's just like, you have to spend some time and really kind of just do your research and do your due diligence, because there's definitely good people out there that are doing really good things. And there's a lot of people who are doing remote things. So you don't have to get stuck with like the people that are just in your area anymore. There's like plenty of people out there. And I could like, put some people in the show notes or whatever at the end of this.
I actually think that's one of the positives of COVID, having everything kind of go online. Remote coaching, what we do, remote PT, you do that obviously through trainingthinktank.com. Yep. There are all these remote courses. Now you can even take online classes at a college or university online. And is it as good as in person? Probably not in most cases, but still having the access to that, I think is pretty cool. And that's honestly where I've learned, other than picking your brain, a lot of the movement concepts that I use from people that I trust online. The challenge that I have, and this is kind of an interesting question for you, is there's a pushback to, you need to listen to the experts. And not everyone can be an expert, right? You hear that like through COVID. I think the health response, whether you think it was good or bad, there's a bunch of stuff out there constantly, right? And that's the same thing is true both in the training space, like what we do for remote coaching, and then also in the PT space, what you're doing with what you alluded to, right? All the people that are online. How do I pick people that I should trust? And why would I be the one that gets to choose who's right and wrong? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's hard. I wish there was a good answer for that. I think part of the way that you can do it is almost by watching them as they progress through their I don't know, like outward facing media and seeing if like what their clients are doing and what are the processes that they're going through. I think there's a lot of people who are putting their thought processes out there and their frameworks, and they're then putting their clients out there. And I don't think you need to like blast like, oh, I've done X, Y, and Z and look at all the success that I've had. Cause this is maybe just a personal thing, but like all the things that I do and all the things that I help people with, whether that's a coaching aspect or if that's a physical therapy aspect, at the end of the day, like it's on them. Like that's their success. Like I've just kind of like given them some guardrails and some guidelines to go through, and that's their success. So I don't really necessarily see that as mine, but I do personally want to put them out there just so people know like I do this thing. And I think you can find other people who act like that and put like, their successes, if we can call it that, on their Instagram or on their YouTube, and just you can watch them help other people. And I think if you can find those individuals who are doing that, like that gives you a good idea of like what you're walking into before you just start blindly following somebody.
Yeah. Let's talk about your process when you're either evaluating movement or evaluating movement for performance. So we talked about Meg. She's one of my athletes. Yep. She had both some shoulder issues and some wrist issues. She comes to you. Yeah. She says, hey, I want to make semifinals. That's my next goal in the sport of CrossFit. How are you assessing someone like her who is trying to perform in a sport versus maybe, let's just say it was me. I'll be the other person. I'm person B who comes to you and says like, hey, my knee's bothering me. I don't really care about performance. I just want to be able to live. I want to be able to play with my kids, go play some golf, but there aren't performance goals.
Yeah. I have I guess like a baseline movement screen that I do with basically everybody. It's a combination of some lower body movements and a combination of some upper body movements. And I'm just looking for things that stand out versus what I think is an average or what I expect from like a norm of people.
Would you do the same thing for both the sports performer and the average Joe?
The baseline, yes. Yes. And then it deviates from there. So like you would stay in like one path and it probably wouldn't go it wouldn't go much further out from that. Where for Meg, it goes out more from that, where I want to see what's her handstand push-up like, what's her snatch look like, what's her handstand walking position, can she hang from the bar, does she do bar muscle ups well, like all of these things. I want to see that from her because I need to know what does her sports position look like and what's being affected by the movement and deficiencies, I guess we can call, or impairments that she has. Where for you, it's more like, okay, like we can just do these baseline tests, and then I can just give you things based off these things to make changes, and it's probably going to help you. And I don't need to know the other things because it's not necessary for your end goal. And to your point, for my framework, what I do is like I just start from the end. Really, it's like, well, what are we trying to get back to? For you, it's like playing with your kids and going golfing. For Meg, it's I want to clean a bar, snatch a bar, walk on my hands. So she needs to be able to do those things. So it's like, okay, let me see them. Why can't you do them? And then let's do the baseline test. And for you, it's just, let's just do the baseline test because it's probably enough information for me to start making good decisions about like where we need to go.
Yeah. Before we talk about the sports performance athletes, I think that's probably where most people want to listen to. Let's talk about the average person. Just for those that are listening, maybe they're not performing anymore, but they do have some aches and pains, especially those that have been in the CrossFit space or they did a sport growing up. Most people have these little aches and pains, right? Sure. What are the movement patterns that you think people need to be functional? Like, do I need to be able to get into a deep squat? Do I need to be able to get my hands all the way over my head?
Yeah. Oh, man, that's a loaded question. Do you need to do those things? No. I would say that the things that you need to do are whatever are reflective of what you need to do in life. Sure. So for you, it's play golf. So your hands your hands need to go over your head in some capacity when you're on the backswing of the club. But for people in a normal day, we very rarely put our hands over our head except to maybe like reach things off a top of shelf in our kitchen. So I'm not necessarily too worried about people having perfect shoulder flexion if like that's something that we need to chase down. It's like looking at Dave Hoberg when I screened him. He just wants to be healthy for life. He's got a new kid. He wants to be able to play tennis. So it's just like, okay, well, he needs to be able to stand on one leg. He doesn't need to be able to deadlift off the floor. He doesn't need to like pull heavy weight. He doesn't need to clean. It's just like he needs to be able to bend over, touch. He needs to be able to stand on one leg, shift his body weight, stand without losing balance, and then maybe do that with a little bit of force so he can actually play tennis.
Yeah, so Dave was on the podcast about a month ago. He's the 50-plus-year-old who has the newborn baby, and we're going to do a little series with him.
Yep. For sure.
Cool.
But for you, it's like, or for like the normal people, like, do we need to squat all the way down? Probably not. Like most chairs are at a parallel squat. So like, as long as you can do that, or maybe even just touch a little bit below parallel, you're totally fine. I could go the opposite side and just say for like longevity purposes, it might be good that you have the ability to do that, but you don't necessarily need to be able to do that.
Sure. How important would it be for someone like me then for you to kind of push me to those like deeper in ranges?
Depends on your ability. I know all these questions are going to start with it depends, but it would depend on, are we dealing with pain and injury?
Sure.
Like, are those things in our way, and are they affecting your movement patterns? Like, is that something that we have to be cognizant of? And then after that, it's like, does it mean anything to you? Because if it doesn't mean anything to you, me forcing my ideals on you about what movement should be, or if me forcing like you into a position that you just don't care about, does not matter. And you're going to either resent me about it, not do it, or just like push it off. So it just becomes such like a, I don't know, not meaningful thing to you that you just like don't do it within your day. So like when I'm talking to somebody who's not performance based, I want those things to be meaningful, or both performance-based and not performance-based, they have to be meaningful to the person. Because if they're not meaningful, they're not going to do it. So I always try to relate it to something within their life, whether that is movement specific or whether that's just like, hey, you need to be able to walk up the stairs or up and down your stairs to like, I don't know, put your kids to bed or do laundry or whatever it is. And like, so here's the things that we need to do in order to get you there. So if we work on these, it will get better. And then you won't have to like worry about the difficulties of descending stairs or whatnot.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same thing in training, right? Yeah. Like people say that they want to, quote unquote, make the games or semifinals or, whatever their goal may be, but how much do they actually want that? That's kind of the deeper question that you have to get to. And if someone doesn't really want that, like there are other things that are quote unquote priorities for them, they're always going to kind of go off the guardrails that you put up for them. So making sure that someone buys into that process first, I think is right on. Yep. Let's turn the gears to the sports performance athlete, because that is most of our audience, or they just want to do certain things like muscle ups or handstand walking, squat cleans, and they want to do that without pain. Someone comes to you and they have some movement restrictions. What's that first step after you realize that is their goal? Hey, I want to squat clean to full depth without pain in my knee.
Yeah. First step is figuring out how long it's been going on for. So if like someone's dealing with pain, it's always like, okay, well, how did it start? Where did it start? Was there a specific time, or did it just build up? How long it's been going on for? Because all these things matter. If it was like a specific event versus like a thing that was building over time, it's like, okay, well, now we're dealing with an overuse injury versus like a traumatic injury. And those things kind of like give me some insight into like what we need to do. After like establishing that, it's going through the movement screen. So I have an understanding of how they actually move or they manipulate their body in space, and then manage like their center of mass versus like a barbell or versus like just being able to like balance. And then from there, it's doing sport specific stuff. And taking all that information in gives me just like an idea of like where we can go and what we need to do. So like if someone comes in with knee pain and they want to squat clean, it's like, okay, well, can you flex your knee all the way? And if you can't, like, why is that stopping you? What do we need to do? Is it something that we can change within a session? And then if it is something that we can change within a session, it's probably something that, by 2 weeks from now, you're going to be okay with, and we can like move forward. But if we can't change it within a session, not that this is not like a blanket statement, but if we can't change it within a session, it's probably just going to take a little bit more time, and we have to be a little bit more diligent about the way that we're progressing and being smart about taking some things away and then giving some things back. And we can make this really, really easy for people, because I never want to be the person who says, hey, you can't do this thing. You just can't do this thing right now. Because like if you're running into pain and injury, there's no need to continuously like layer on load and progressive volume and all this thing.
A lot of us have done that though.
Yes, for sure.
Don't do it.
People do it all the time. I did it to myself. I literally injured my shoulder, like, I don't know, 6 months in the CrossFit because I never took a day off. But going back, it's just like, we can make categories like a red light, a yellow light, and a green light. Green lights are all the movements that are good. Here's the things that we can do right now, and you can hammer this because there's plenty of things in CrossFit to be good at. Yellow lights are like the movements that we're not sure about, that sometimes are a little bothersome and sometimes that are okay. And then the red lights are the ones that are totally bothersome. It's just like, okay, our goal is to take all the red light movements, bring them to the yellow light, then bring them to the green light. And like, how do we do that? And we just like start to have a conversation between me and that person to establish like some guidelines and some thought processes about like what they need to do. And it really comes down to really good communication between me and that person, so we can make sure that like we are making progress and they're not feeling like they're getting like left behind or feeling like they're losing progress, which definitely comes with injury and those types of things.
You talked about figuring out if it was either chronic, something that's been lasting a long time. I think I'd be a perfect example of that, just having issues with the post-accident or post breaking my leg in college. Like both of those things have caused issues long-term, or the person that has an acute injury. I did a squat clean. All of a sudden my knee feels funny in the gym and I come to you the next day. Yeah. What's the difference between those two athletes and how are you assessing them differently?
The assessment process doesn't necessarily get too crazy different. It just gives me an awareness that like it's going to take more time. Like for you, if like we wanted to like really like get into like why you can't fully close your knee down, like it's just going to take more time
because it's been messed up longer.
Correct.
Is that the reason?
Yeah, right. There's more time. Your tissue changes, like neurological changes. All those things start to affect it. Even like your like mindset about what does that mean to you? You know what I mean? Like you're like, I just don't squat to parallel or like below parallel anymore because like I get knee pain. It's like, okay, well, can we even change your thought process behind that? Which is a whole different conversation that we could get into. The person who comes in like that just did the squat clean and their knees bothered. It's like, okay, well, like this is like this doesn't necessarily need to become something that becomes long-term, and we can take a step back right now. And maybe in a week from now, we can be totally fine. Or even if we just use Meg, like she came up to me and she was like, my shoulder was bothering me after doing a strict handstand push-up. And then it's been, a week, I think, right? Yeah. And she's already doing handstand walking, ring muscle-ups and stuff. So it's just like, okay, like she came up and she was like, something's wrong. And it's just like, for her, it was very obvious what was wrong. And it was like, okay, like let's just pull back on the things that are bothering you, which was all the overhead pressing and vertical pressing things, or vertical and horizontal pressing. And then we can just give you some of the accessory rehab-like exercises, and you'll be back to form pretty soon.
So how important is it for an athlete to identify that right away and reach out to someone, or at least have preventative exercises they can do with themselves?
Yeah, that's it's hard because this sport is hard on your body. Right. So it's like, how do you begin to conceptualize like what is an okay level of pain? And I don't even like really like saying that, but an okay level
it's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like an okay level of pain or discomfort that you're feeling versus like a not okay level of pain and discomfort. And I don't know if there's a clear deviation or line in the sand that we can draw there, because people, and this could be a huge conversation, but people feel pain differently. We all perceive pain differently. So like what I understand as pain and what I feel as pain when I get hurt is probably very different than what you feel versus what's very different than Chris feels. So it's like, I don't have a great way of telling people like, how do you know like this is acceptable? But I think as a person, if you're like, okay, like this is a little bit beyond my soreness level, but it's not like deterring me. And then if that thing starts to deter you more and more and more often, you're like, okay, I'm trending down a line, or I'm trending down like this pathway that's probably not that good. But if you like do something and you're like, yep, that's not good, and you know right there and then, it's like, okay, well, use your awareness and use your intelligence so that you can stop this process before it gets too late.
Yeah. Do you find, you talked about pain and how people perceive that differently, which is certainly true. Like they've had tests on like pain tolerance and all of that. Do you find people that perceive themselves as tough that often are more injured or have more chronic stiffness in specific joints?
I definitely come across people who tell me I have a high pain tolerance all the time.
Yeah.
There's like, it's like the most common thing that people say to me besides like, hey, I'm hurt. I don't know what to say about that.
Are they full of shit or what?
Man, I just don't think they know. It's just like,
let's just say someone is tough. Maybe this is a better question. If someone, like, man, they are tough and like they have to be hurting.
Yeah.
Do they typically have really stiff joints? Like, do they end up just like breaking down so much? They don't even know it. And they're squatting and all of a sudden their squat is like barely to parallel because they have so much, whatever residual tightness from always pushing through the pain.
Yeah. I can see it both ways.
Okay.
I know people. I have two people in my head right now that I know. There's this girl out there right now who's very, very tough, and she probably won't say anything until like it's bothering her and it's affecting her. And then to your point, the person who's very stiff and rigid and almost like Travis, basically.
Yeah.
Like he's very good at like, what do you call it? Like holding on to those things and not letting them affect him until like it's almost built up to this point where it's less like, well, if you would have said something to me 2 months ago, we probably could have like stop this or quell this a little bit, but like you waited so long because you're just like,
oh, this has been bothering you for 3 months.
Yeah, exactly. Like the lead up to the games with the knee, and I was just like, oh man, we could have been doing stuff for this all along, but hey, like, we figured it out at the end.
Right. Yeah. So do you think though that person has a higher likelihood of getting hurt long term? That's kind of what I'm getting to, is like, I wonder if people would just not be, there's a difference between like being, this is a bad way to say it, but like metabolically tough. Like, okay, good job. You can push through a hard workout and breathe hard, and just manage that kind of like metabolic pain, and joint pain toughness, if that makes sense. Like, I'm going to pride myself on always being hurt, because I go to a CrossFit competition and everyone has knee sleeves and elbow sleeves and wrist wraps, and they're like, maybe some of that's performance enhancing. You just use it even though you're not in pain. But a lot of people use those to hide the pain that they actually have in their knees or their elbows, and you can see it, especially as you age in the Masters categories. I mean, go to the competition, Masters, the fitness collective that's going on this next weekend, or Legends. A lot of people end up getting hurt because they just disregard.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's not like, we love our Masters athletes and we have a bunch that are really, really good, but that's something I always preach is like, don't always fight through the pain, especially at that age where your movement quality maybe is already deteriorated a little bit.
Yep.
Just so you don't get to the point where you're always broken.
Where do you do it personally? So you made the point that pain's, on a spectrum and people, handle it differently. But for you personally, where do you draw the line when you're working out and you get a pain?
Me personally?
Yeah. Do you have like a kind of a...
Yeah, I haven't been hurt in a while, so I also have been training that hard, so it's hard for me
What
to
do you
say.
push through and what do you cut it off?
I just so I don't necessarily like this, and I haven't really figured out a different way to explain this to people, but like if we do as a pain scale from like 0 to 10, 10 is the worst pain that you've ever been in your entire life, and like you're floating around like a 3 or 3 and below, that's an acceptable level of pain that we can tolerate as humans and kind of move through. So Can you give me an example of sometime you felt a 3? Like you were doing X and what was
Every
it?
day when I wake up.
I mean, like
during workouts, I mean.
Yeah. So I hurt my left shoulder when I got into CrossFit. I alluded to that earlier, and I'm pretty sure I tore my rotator cuff. And it's just like on and off. If I don't like touch on it every once in a while, it just like creeps back up normally with like high volume, like strict pressing and handstand push-ups, which is what I'm not great at. So if I do enough of those things, like that's when it starts to get like bothered and like I can feel it like building. And there's just, I can't describe it to you other than like I just know it's happening, and like I have to make the conscious decision to be like, okay, like I need to start doing stuff for it now, or it's going to become a problem.
This is the 3.
This is like the 3.
So it's kind of like whispering at you.
Yep,
like,
exactly.
I feel like you're more intuitive than most people though when it comes to that pain. Like most people probably would be like, it's bothering me a little bit, but I'm going to keep pushing through because my coach wrote this. And then it's when they finish that session, they wake up the next day and they're like, I can't move my arm.
For sure.
Yeah. That's what I was trying to get to, is I just wonder if there's like some way that we could always like regulate athletes down a little bit to just make sure, but without, you said this earlier, like you can't be so aware because there's always pain in the sport that you're never training.
Yeah.
You're always doing rehab work.
I know. It's just so hard. It's like people experience pain so differently, and like there's so many things that go into like our background, how we grew up, our socioeconomic status, our stress from work and life. Like, did we sleep well? Did we eat well? How do we perceive our bodies? And then like some of like the more biomechanical and like neurological things, like all of these things like affect the way that we perceive pain. So it's just so hard for me. It's like so hard for me and other coaches to be like, here's some like hard lines in the sand where you kind of have to like really like rely on your athlete to be smart and be intelligent and like make good choices for themselves. I'm a very open person, and my athletes know that basically they can text me at any point. So I try to like really push that on them. Like, don't be stupid. Like, yeah, sometimes like you're going to have some like niggles, I guess, if we can call it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
we're over in England.
I know. And if you can like deal with those niggles, like that's fine. That's cool. But there's no reason to like keep layering it on. If it keeps becoming this thing and it's keep talking to you, like let's do something about it. So before it comes too late.
Yeah. So let's go back to your assessing the athlete.
Yep.
This is something that I've always been interested in because I've seen this in every sport that I've either coached or been a part of. There's the athlete that doesn't move very well, but they move really well for the sport.
Yeah.
In other words, in CrossFit, let's say, someone doesn't have a perfect squatting pattern, but their hips are relatively open, even though their ankles aren't. So they spread their feet out. They get into this really, really wide squat, and they still get below parallel. It's super fast and efficient. They're not having pain. It's just not perfect, right? Like you wouldn't look at them and say, wow, that's a really good squat pattern. You say, he's a little short on depth or she's a little short on depth, but it works really well for the sport. Does that matter to you?
I don't think so. I don't have like, I'm not like, this needs to look like this.
Yeah.
This is how you need to squat. Toes forward, knees tracking over your toes, sitting down below parallel. Like it's just so unrealistic because we're just shaped so differently. So like even if we just take like a purely like biomechanical or like anthropomorphic like look at a human being, like your limbs are different than my limbs.
Sure.
You're gonna squat differently than I am. like someone else has different restrictions than I do. Like I'm very like loose and mobile. So like I can sit down in really, really nice squat patterns where like Travis can't. Like he has to figure it out in a different manner. So I think trying to fit people into a mold that like they'll never get to is silly and it's not conducive. Now, could they maybe do it over time? Maybe they can like spend a year or whatnot and like doing lots of like end range stretches, loaded stretching, and changing the way that their body is. But if they figured it out and they're only in the sport for a short amount of time, it's like, okay, well, like where are they finding value out of? And like, what weighs more to them? Like, is it competing in this sport, or is it like spending time doing these end range stretches, these loaded stretches, and like spending time doing movement work, which can be not sexy for people?
Sure. So let's talk about that. How would you prioritize that? Because you're both a PT and you also write training programs for athletes. So you're doing a little bit of both, probably with all of your athletes, right?
For sure.
How are you prioritizing that athlete's training program, including their movement and mobility protocols that you give them, if maybe they don't move perfectly, but it's working for them at that time?
Yeah, I have a couple of athletes who like fit that mold completely, that they're just a little bit more rigid, a little bit more stiff. They can't hit like those perfect positions.
Sure.
I start with giving them things, and then I just kind of like see what they do with it. Like, do they follow it? Do they like it? Do they give me feedback on it? Are they seeing changes? I have a bunch of people who said they wanted to change movement patterns, and then I gave them the work to do that, and then they didn't follow through because it's not fun. It does, and it takes time, and they want to just be able to pick up the barbell and snatch or whatever they want to do. So it really and I know I've like said this a bunch of times, but it's like motivation, or it's them motivating themselves to do that, or like them finding worth in doing that. If there's no worth and they're not excited about it, like I'm just going to take it away, and I'm just going to be the coach, and I'm not going to be the PT or the physio guy. And it's hard for me to separate those two, but I have to like recognize, like, if they're not willing to put in the time, then I'm not going to force it on them to do that.
Right. I think that's the hardest part as a coach, is trying to find that balance and encouraging them to find the worth in it.
For sure.
Right. Like, because you're putting it in there for a reason.
Yeah.
But they have to find that reason too.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. So back to the sports performance athlete, you're doing that assessment. You see some things that you need to work on. How are you, again, prioritizing the performance aspects of the sport with the movement qualities that they have? So let's go back to, archetype like Meg, who's prepping for a competition, or let's just say for the CrossFit season. She wants to make semifinals. She was just a few spots out last year. Handstand push-ups are the thing that she struggles with. I mean, this is a female who just back squatted 275 pounds 9 times, full depth yesterday. She's so strong, so talented with the barbell, but has this one thing. And the problem is that it's her shoulder or wrist that have caused some of those issues. So how are you looking at someone like that? Or maybe you could talk in more broad terms for the people at home.
We can use her as an example.
Cool.
The thing that actually has been really cool about doing this here is that I don't have to worry about her performance stuff or anybody that I really work with, because that's on you. Like that's totally your side of the spectrum, and I'm just the other side of the spectrum. Like I see training and rehab as one spectrum. They're not different from each other. I'm just giving different exercises to hopefully help bring her back up to that performance metric, so you can completely take over again, and then you don't need my input onto her, like what she needs to work with. So for her, we figured out that she came up to me and she basically was like, I can't do these things right now. It's like, okay, well, I don't have to tell you not to do them, because you already know that you can't do them because they're causing you so much pain. But it's like, okay, there's very tangible things that we can get after. I can get into it, but it was like shoulder external rotation. She couldn't move her scapula well. Every time that she tried to bring her arm up in like a high pull position, she couldn't elevate her shoulder blade. So there were things that was like, okay, these are very glaring issues that you need to be able to do in order to do the sport. So let's do some stuff that is going to help you get back to that position. And I think it literally was like a week or a week and a half. Yeah. And she sent me a message. She's like, I'm already doing a bottom up kettlebell press, totally pain free, and it feels great. And then literally yesterday,
a week and a half of doing your stuff, and she was already.
Yep.
Wow.
I think that's the importance of identifying an issue right away, because Meg, or anybody, like those that listening at home, I've done this a lot, especially in earlier years. I have an issue. I just keep pushing through it. And I keep pushing through it some more. And I keep pushing through it. And then all of a sudden it takes weeks or months to unwind that issue that I have. Whereas she was wise enough to know, hey, something's different today. Like, you have to almost be thoughtful enough about what's going on in your own body to then identify that and then reach out to someone like Kyle to help with that.
Yeah, I agree.
So what about someone that comes on and they want more efficient movement patterns? Let's kind of go pull all the way back to the full assessment that you're doing, because I keep jumping you all over the place. You find out their goals, whatever those may be.
Yeah.
Then you do your baseline assessment. What's after that for the CrossFit athlete? What other assessment pieces are you doing thinking about all of these things that are now in the sport? Like they have to do handstand push-ups, but they have to do them wall facing. They've got to be able to do them regular. They got to walk up a ramp, so they have to have really good wrist flexion and extension. They have to do stuff hanging from a barbell. They have to do heavy loads, like all of these different variations.
Yeah.
It's almost like ideally you just move perfectly in every plane.
For sure. Are you talking about within the spectrum of being a physical therapist or like a coach? Because not that they're very different for me, because like I obviously like one hat can't ever leave. Like that's just the way that I view things. When I take people on, I basically give them a battery of tests. So like in the coaching aspect, I give them a battery of tests, and it's probably really annoying to them because it's like, I don't even know, 70 movements that I want to see. And it's all different positions, all different squatting types, all different like hinging patterns. Because I just want to know how do they move. So when we go into those things where it's like a wall-facing handstand push-up, a deficit handstand push-up, a kipping handstand push-up, a parallel handstand push-up, I kind of have already an idea of like what that is going to look like based on the things that I saw from the movement screen. Do I think it needs to be that extensive? Probably not. It's probably overkill at some point because it's just so much and it's so much information. It's almost like analysis by paralysis or paralysis by analysis, that there's just so much that you can't just like take it all in.
To be fair though, there are so many things that are tested now in the sport, and it's just all, you know, quote unquote, constantly varied. You know, the unknown and unknowable, like we're always guessing of what's going to come out.
Yeah. I think the way that I do it, at least when I take on clients, is just to be able to help them as much as I physically can. When it's kind of like that rehab person coming in and they're looking for more efficient movement patterns, maybe there's not necessarily pain, but there's like just limitations. It's like, okay, well, what are the archetypes that you have to get into? Like you have to be able to squat deep. Like it's like a product of the sport. Like if you're going to clean and you're going to snatch and you're going to do wall balls and thrusters and pistols, right? You need to be able to get into a good squatting pattern. It has to happen. So it's just like, well, what do you look like right now versus like, what is that archetype that we have of a person? It doesn't need to be perfect, because obviously like people compensate all the time, and you can watch people just elevate their heel as they go into a pistol squat because they don't have their requirement like of dorsiflexion and like hip rotation in order to get down in that position. So it's like seeing things like that. It's like, okay, if you want to make those patterns more efficient, we have to probably take a step back from what you're currently doing, because you're creating motor patterns that are going to be really hard to break. And that's probably the most challenging thing, is walking back something that's already learned from somebody and then giving them a new pattern and a new way of thinking about movement, or getting them to do the movement.
The people you have successfully had walk back something like you're describing, do they all share any common traits? Like what is it about the person who can take that step back approach and actually execute versus the people you tell them and they just, don't follow through?
For sure. I mean, Allison Ralphs, she came to me last year, I think right before quarterfinals, and she was just like, I think she like rolled her ankle on the right side and she was having pain, or I believe, and she's like, I can't do a pistol without my heel like getting super elevated. And we spent, I don't even know, maybe 3 or 4 weeks-ish, kind of like going back and forth and just doing a session a week. And we basically walked back her thought process about how she was loading her legs and getting into the pistol. Now, I gave her movement work that she basically did religiously on like multiple times a day. So I'm not just like saying that we did one thing and then it changed. Like she did a lot of work to do it. But she went from basically being very, very heel elevated to almost heel hovering to a very flat foot. And you can go look at, she's on my Instagram somewhere. I took a video of it. It doesn't work like that for everybody. It was really quick for her. Now she has to keep doing it, because if she does not do it right now, the way that her motor pattern had been learned, it goes back to it keeps just showing up again and again. So she has to have constant touches on it so she can keep that like really nice flat heel and then letting the knee track forward while keeping her chest upright. Because like part of the problem was like the heel was coming up and then her lower back was starting to blow up because she was using such like a hinging dominant pattern in order to get the pistol done. So she worked it well going into last year's quarterfinals, and then like she took some time off, and now we're kind of like doing it again. Yeah. But it just showed me that if she's motivated enough and she has worth in it, which is like what I keep coming back to, like it meant something to her, she was able to do that. And I think
for her at the time, it was getting to that semifinal, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
You have to have very specific goals to hold you accountable. I think otherwise it makes it very hard, because the movement stuff can be boring. I mean, it can be exciting too when you see changes, but for most people, especially in a sport like CrossFit, they want to do all the exercises in the gym. They don't want to do all the mobility stuff before or after or during a session.
I wish people would, I know this is really hard, and I know this is like a blanket statement, but I wish people would semi-care a little bit more about the way that they move, because I think it just I think it just serves them well to move well in the sport, especially with like the high demand of like volume and loading that is required from the sport. I think if you just move a little bit better, which is like such a like a I don't like an esoteric statement that like what is moving better, but it's like you're probably going to be better for it long term.
Yeah, I don't think it's esoteric at all. I think that's actually very tangible. And most people, I mean, I always have said movement is king in the sport, and people are like, yeah, whatever. And I don't mean just like mobility. And that's kind of why I asked that question earlier about like how important is it to have this perfect position versus an efficient position.
Yeah.
And efficiency can be different from one person to the next when you talk about squatting. I can still reach depth and do a certain squat. It's going to look way different than when you do it. But if we did 30 wall balls, all I'm thinking about in the sport at least is how fast can I do it without pain and make sure that I can do that over the long haul, right? Yeah. And so for some people, the efficiency may look much different, but it's still movement economy, right? Being as efficient, using less effort per rep on whatever movement it may be. Now, the risk there is obviously you compensate so much that you cause other issues, which is kind of what you're here for, to help people unwind from that, or again, be those guardrails so that people don't do that.
Yep.
So the thought that I had when you were talking about like someone like Allison, let's just say that someone's listening and they have something going on right now. Their heel's lifting when they do a pistol, or their overhead position's really bad and they can't get into a good handstand walk position. How much time should they spend on that versus their normal training? Like, how do you incorporate both into a good training program to make sure that they're making progress on both?
Man, that's a loaded question. It's just like, how much time do you have?
Yeah,
that's really that would be my answer. For Allison, like her job is to be an athlete, so she can spend as much time as she needs to on it. For other people, you have a full-time job, you have kids, you have hobbies outside of the sport. Like you can't spend all day. So it's like, well, what are you willing to give up in terms of the other things that you need to do, like the other priorities that you have, so that you can spend time doing this thing? If it's 10 minutes, it's 10 minutes. Like, give yourself, like, I think 10 minutes is probably like the most time that I think most people need to spend on it. Like, you can just throw them in as like warm-ups, like, which is what I do for most people. It's just like, okay, like, I know you're going to spend time warming up. Like, let's just put some of the movement things that you definitely need in here as part of your warm-up. So we're actually touching it and making some progress on it, especially if like movement efficiency is the thing that we're looking to get out of somebody. If we're looking to change patterns and get more of an efficient pattern, putting it in the warm-up is going to help, because like they're going to go into their back squats and their snatches, and it's going to help them get into the position, which the load then will then help change the pattern. Now, if it's like we're walking into like I'm missing dorsiflexion, that's probably going to take a little bit of time, because
I can't get into a squat or something like that.
Yeah, it's just like, well, why? Because like, is it like the front of the ankle, is it the back of the ankle? Is it your foot? Is it like the ability of the tibia to rotate? Is it your hip rotation? Can it flex and extend? Can you like do all these other things that are required of you to get into the squat? Like, I'm not sure. So if there's one thing missing, it's probably going to be a little bit quicker if there's multiple things missing.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about like some actual application. Like for the people listening at home, they have tight ankles, they have tight knees, tight hips, whatever. I know this is still broad, but just give us some basics, like an outline of what are some things that they can start doing right away to help open up. Let's just say it is like soft tissue right now. What are things that they can do to open up their ankle or open up their hip?
Hold on. Before you answer that, what is the most common thing you see all the time?
In terms of injury, or in terms of like restriction, or terms
restriction? You have a most common one? Surely there's something that...
I mean, I feel like everyone's always talking about their ankles or their hamstrings or things, something like that. So I think those are probably the most common ones, or shoulder flexion, lat tightness. I think that's probably the other big one. People are like, well, I put my hand up and I can't get my hand over my head, so I can't do snatches and jerks, and I can't handstand walk.
Okay, with that one, do what he was asking.
Okay, so do like what's the most common thing?
Yeah, well, just like some basics that they can use at home right now to start, let's say, lat tightness.
Yeah, okay, so lat tightness, there's a bunch of different things that you could like travel down the road of. The first one's like doing like an elevated cat stretch and just holding it 30 to 60 seconds. Technically, like the research says like a 30-second hold, but that might not be enough intensity and load for you, so you kind of have to like judge this based on yourself.
Before you go farther than this is something I've been thinking about, is how do you manage that? Like what is intensity when you talk about the stretching load? Like how, quote unquote, painful should it be?
Yeah.
How hard should the stretch be? Should I be like sweating after I'm done with this, or should it be something that I'm easing into? What are you telling your athletes?
That's a good question.
Aggressive rip off the front.
Yeah, I know, right? I was just like, get aggressive about it. Let's go.
I mean, the thing is like you see different people stretch. So like if I stretch, let's say my lats, or I'm working on my overhead position, I go as deep as I want, and there's never like any intense feelings.
Yeah.
If I did that with my ankles, very intense feelings. You know, like it's just like the level is so different based on the body part for me.
I think if you go too intense, you're restricting yourself because your body is going to tighten down and be like, this is a threat. And I'm perceiving,
what are you doing?
I'm perceiving this as a threat. So I'm going to stop you. And like, that's, when people feel cramping or they try to like shove themselves into a position that they're not comfortable in, like that's what they're going to feel. Like they're going to feel like their body's under a threat. So they're going to stop themselves from like being able to actually make changes in there. So it would be better to almost ramp the contraction or ramp the position that you're trying to achieve and build it over time. Time could be within that session. Time could be over a couple of weeks. Just kind of depends on what we're talking about.
So maybe slowly, like almost melt into the position and then get into kind of a more intense.
It's just like for the lat stretch, like it could be elevated cat stretch could be the first thing that you do, which is like very based on your body weight. Like you put your hands on like a box and you just like let your chest sink forward. We could go back and forth on all this, but I'm going to try to be, I'm just going to try to like speak in almost absolutes. So you do that. That could be like step one. And it could be like, do that for like 30 seconds, 3 sets of that. Then it could be like, okay, next time you're going to do it for 45 seconds. And then the next time it's 60 seconds. It's like, okay, now I've been doing this for like a minute and I'm not getting anything else anymore. So it's like, now you need intensity. Your intensity was time. Now we're going to add load. Just another way of adding intensity. We're going to do a dumbbell pullover. So you're going to get your back on the bench. Hips are going to be extended off so you can get the full length from the lat. Hands start above your chest, and then you're going to lower it all the way down with an eccentric. So like a 3-second eccentric, pause in the bottom. So now we're adding length, and we're starting to establish strength in that end range. So you're lengthening the lat, adding strength to the lat, and then you can pull back out of it. So that's one way of doing it. Then we can go into single arm variations and other things like that. But I've seen relatively good success doing those things. And there's other ways that we could get into going into the lat as well.
Yeah. So basics would be start 3 by 30 seconds.
Sure.
Just you hold the in range for 30 seconds. Maybe the first time you do it, not super intense, kind of melt into that position. Over time, see if you can build to 45 seconds, a little bit more intense, 60 seconds, a little bit more intense. Once that feels comfortable and you're getting a pretty deep in range, go to a loaded stretch, something like the dumbbell pullover.
Yeah.
And then a single arm variation of that would be?
Like the landmine lateral raise where you're like in that hollow hold or like bent knee hold position and you have the landmine and you're just bringing it all the way back. It's going to be very similar to the dumbbell pullover, but it allows you to basically just use one arm and not be, because like holding one dumbbell is a little weird, but holding the landmine would be way better. You could also go down the road of like using FRC and like pails and rail principles, which I have found a lot of success with. Some people it's really, really effective for, and then some people not so much. And that's kind of like where we kind of like have to do trial and error and like literally play. But using the pails and rails is just like using your own body's ability to create a contraction at a specific range. So
let's dive into that just so people understand. Give us kind of the main principles. I know it's deeper than probably the
So like
first layer.
I have not taken the courses just as an FYI, but from what I understand, like you get into a position, you kind of hold that position. So it's the lat stretch. You're going to do like the elevated cat stretch, and then from there you would push. PALS is like progressive angular loaded isometrics and then a regressive angular isometric. So you're just doing the eccentric and the concentric side of the contraction. So it would be like pushing down into the box in order to do the lat contraction, and then you'd be lifting up from the box to do like the eccentric or the lengthening portion of it. And you're trying to create a contraction on both sides of the joint and both sides of the muscle in order to change the length or the perception of that end range position and strengthen it for yourself.
Sure. So you could think of it as easy as maybe you do a passive stretch for 1 minute to 2 minutes, and then a 10-second maximal isometric. You got to be careful with that because this is an easy way to cramp or be too intense and then obviously become more rigid. Let's say it is a lat stretch. I'm down on the bench. I push down into the bench or the box for 10 seconds, and then I pull off for 10 seconds.
Yep, correct.
Most people can't actually pull off the box in that position because you're in your deepest in range, but you're actively telling your brain is trying to actively tell your hands to get off the box, which again, probably won't happen.
Yeah. I do that all the time with people with like hip 90-90 stuff who like want to like work on like that rotation. And you can't lift your leg off the box.
No.
At least when you start.
Yeah,
it's really,
no way.
really hard.
So what have you found as far as like people that works for versus people that it doesn't work for? Is there like a certain kind of archetype there, or is it just kind of completely random?
I haven't like that's something that I am trying to like figure out right now is like who is affected by these things and like what can actually create change. And I don't have a good answer for that right now. And I'm hoping that like with more practice basically with people that I can like start to be like, okay, like I can fit you in this little box and know that we can kind of like funnel some exercises into here and try them. And then you can go in this other little box over here.
Yeah.
But as of right now, I'm not exactly sure like who fits the mold of like the PALS rails, like FRC type of things are going to be really effective for you versus like, you need like the loaded stretching stuff.
Yeah. It's funny you say that because I found great success with it when I actually use it and I'm consistent with it.
Yeah.
With Pels and Rails, but I have had others that haven't had any success. And it's always like, this is the same thing with strength protocols or CrossFit protocols, whatever. It's like, this worked really well for these 12 athletes, and then all of a sudden you use it for someone else and they like just bomb out.
Right.
And you're always trying to figure out how and why certain things don't work. And maybe it's just the variables within that person's life.
Did the people who bomb out really do it?
That's
like,
another.
Well, how much?
Some people say
that's
they
what I
did some
mean.
shit and they never did.
Well, it's just like how much effort did they put into it, and how much did they try to do it,
Yeah.
or like
did they do it correctly?
Was they were they doing it correctly? Like did they all those things matter into this? It's just like so. It comes back like, does it make sense to them, and do they find worth in it? Well, if they don't, like, let's give them just something else, like the dumbbell pullover, because they're like, oh, this is a bodybuilding exercise. I know what this is. I don't really understand what this Pals rail thing is. I'm like laying on the ground. I'm trying to pick up my arm off the ground. Like, this is weird.
Yeah, this is stupid.
Yeah, exactly.
I've heard that one too.
Yeah, exactly.
So with both of those, though, let's just say passive stretch, loaded stretch could be like whatever you would identify those as, but that could be one bucket. Pels rails, a little bit more active. It's like active isometrics, right?
Yeah.
That could be another bucket. You could use that for your ankles, your hips, your knees, quad, whatever, anything that you wanted, correct?
Yep.
Okay. What about actual mechanical issues? The knee joint, the ankle joint are rigid or stuck. How much longer does that take to get someone fit, opened up?
Yep.
And how would you tell someone, what's the process for someone to get out of that restriction?
Man, I'm doing things of that nature like right now.
Yeah.
I'm learning about like more biomechanical, like, I don't want to say like deficiencies, but like impairments and like movements, and how people like can use their own body to create changes in like the joint structures that they currently have. So I'm going through that right now and just learning more about that. I pretty much started like a year ago, and I feel like I'm still learning, and I'll probably always feel like that, just like who I am. But like I'm trying this out with people on the floor right now, like people who do have restrictions like in dorsiflexion. Mia is a great example, and her and I have we've done one session. So like I haven't done too much with her, so I don't want to like get like ahead of myself too much, but we've done one session, and like she stays in what's called supination. So it's really, really challenging for her to get her tibia to go forward, which gets her into a really nice deep squat position. So if you watch Mia squat, it's to parallel. She hits depth, but it's pretty hingy, right? She doesn't ever actually get able to sit all the way down. So for her, it's like there's a literal biomechanical thing, a structural thing that's going on with her foot and her tibia in order to actually allow her to sit down. Like we want to see like a really nice squat. So we have done some work together, and the goal would be to be able to change that structure over time. Now we need to like kind of probably update her exercises so she can actually make those changes. But it starts off with just like learning, like, does the foot make a different shape? Does it go flat or pronate, which people like to see like is not good. When pronation is fine. Like it just happens naturally,
right.
But we want to be able to see that. And right now she doesn't go there.
She can't get into a pronated foot position.
Her arch is so high. It's just stuck in supination. So.
Right. So how much longer would you say, like in general, is that something that people should be more diligent about? Hey, my knee joint actually isn't flexing correctly, or my ankle joint isn't doing this certain thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like that thing is massively important, because if you can't do, like, let's say if you can't close your knee down all the way, you're gonna have
a bad time.
Yeah, a bad time, or compensation up like the chain or down the chain. Like something else has to happen. Something else has to make up the range of motion loss at the knee in order for you to like make the movement happen. So if you're doing snatches and cleans and things of that nature, and you're like, well, I can't close my knee all the way down. Well, the hip has to do something differently, or the foot has to do something differently in order to make up the range of motion, or other structures have to take the load, which probably ends up being like a back thing that people end up running into.
Yeah. I just real quick want to kind of turn back around to the training side of things for you. So obviously you write for athletes remotely, and you've helped with some of our online programs. When you're looking at a training program for someone that maybe is healthy and moves well, how much mobility and movement work, or whatever you want to call it, should that style of athlete be doing?
None. Maybe.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, like I barely do anything like myself. I move really.
And you move really well.
I move really well. Like I'm just gonna put that out there. Like I move really well. It's probably like my biggest like attribute as like an athlete, or like as a person who like moves in space.
Sure.
I move really well. I don't have to spend my time doing anything. So most of the time I don't. Like when I walk in, I might do some like, I'm going to loosely call it activation work, but I probably just pick up the barbell and I start doing whatever that thing is. I have some athletes who are basically in line with me, that they don't need the movement work in order to like start their session. They can just start with snatching. But I have so many other people that don't have that. And I would say more of the people that I work with, which I think is probably more of the population that everybody works with, is the people that needs something versus the people who don't need anything.
Yeah. So if you are someone that moves well, which is probably like less than 1% of the population, you're saying that they can go ahead and just like warm up with the movements that they're going to do.
I think so.
Yeah, back
honestly.
squats, just throw a bar in your back, light, warm up, and then go from there.
I don't like, there's so many like people talking about like, well, if you move well, do you just like warm up with a back squat, or like do you need to like do the goblet squat, like mini band lateral walking thing? If you like that and that's what makes you excited and like it puts you in the right mindset to start your squat session, then yeah. Do you need it? Probably not. Like if you already move well and you're not dealing with pain or injury, or like you don't have to worry about like movement pattern compensations, like just pick up your barbell and just start squatting. Like you're going to be totally fine. But some people like the other stuff, even if they do move well, because it like gets them in the right mindset. They're like, I'm doing something for my body. I'm getting myself prepared to squat. Like this is my ritual. And now I'm going to be able to go and do this thing.
Yeah. How important is it to warm up properly for, let's just say, heavy lifting or for a CrossFit workout?
I mean, I think that's probably one of the biggest things to do. I mean, I have been really bad lately myself about warming up well. Even just like getting my heart rate elevated and like not even like movement specific, all that stuff aside, I've been bad about just like getting my heart rate up and like getting my nervous system ready to like do snatches. Like I'm trying to right now, Adam and I are in a competition to snatch 225.
I was going to ask you about this later. Go ahead. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it.
Yeah. So Adam and I are in a competition right now to snatch 225. I think his max snatch at some point was like 250 or 260.
Yeah.
Mine is 217. Like
okay.
That's the heaviest I've ever snatched.
When did you hit 217?
March.
Okay. So
April of this year.
What's the heaviest you've hit, let's just say in the last month?
205.
Okay. And what's the heaviest Adam has hit?
I think about the same.
Okay. So you guys are the same person right now.
Yeah, we're the same person right now.
And what are you doing for your snatches to go up?
I'm doing whatever Perrin writes me.
Who's writing Adam's program? Is Adam writing it himself?
I think Adam's writing it himself.
Okay.
Yeah. He just like walks in. He's like, I'm going to snatch today. I'm like, okay. All right. Well, good luck. See how that goes.
So you have a structured program. Adam's just kind of doing it on the fly.
Yeah. And
the problem is that he was already at 250.
Right.
So,
exactly.
So he has an advantage there.
Yeah. His muscles remember, I think. Right?
There's something there.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, like for me, like I don't necessarily need to warrant my squat pattern or my overhead pattern. Like I might have to do some stuff for my left shoulder every once in a while, just because like that's a reoccurring, or not a reoccurring injury, but an injury that I had that could be reoccurring if I don't be intelligent about it. But for the most part, like I just need to walk in and like be warm and get my nervous system ramped in order to do that. And I've been real bad about that. Yeah. So I think for people who move well, like that's something that like that's important, like warming up and like getting your nervous system ready, even if it's just like putting yourself in the right mindset, like turning some music on, getting amped up, feeling happy, like all of those things could be the warm up for you. It doesn't necessarily need to be like this, like, okay, I'm going to do my 5 deep lunge thoracic rotation plus whatever the hell else.
Yeah. It's funny because I can ramp up really quickly, but I would, if I didn't warm up the positions, I'd be screwed. Whereas, you know, maybe someone like you need to like really warm up your nervous system and make sure that you're ready to go, but you don't. I mean, you could grab a barbell right now and just go into a deep squat and there'd be no issues.
Yep,
so you need to identify the type of person that you are, those that are listening, and make sure that you're doing that well. That's, to me, that's the hardest thing as people get busy. And even those that maybe are athletes full time, they see a session, they're like, I only have 90 minutes to do this, and it looks like 90 minutes of work, and so they rush their warm up, and then the rest of the session is bad.
Yeah.
So making sure that they identify the things that they need to get ready for, I think is important.
Can we switch into it? Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say one thing before we want to switch. I was going to say, someone who does move really well, that does like prioritize their warm up, is Alexis. I don't know if you ever watch her when she trains, but she does a really well thought out warm up every single time, but she moves really well.
Yeah.
And I think that's partially to keep her moving well, partially because it gets her in the right mindset and like sets the tone for her session. But I like watch her be very diligent about that. So just because you do move well doesn't mean that you don't need to do those things.
Right.
You can still probably gain things out of it. I'm just saying that you don't have to do them.
Yeah.
That kind of leads to what I was going to say. I was like, so you were following us for a long time off-site. Then you came. When did you start working here? 2 years ago?
Almost 2 years ago now.
2 years ago?
Yep.
My question is, what is the biggest thing that you learned being on site with all these elite level athletes and watching and worked on them and with them for the past 2 years? What kind of juicy insights did you get that you didn't anticipate?
In terms of like
anything, like you just mentioned Alexis, she comes in and does that. Like, what else have you seen and learned?
Man, I wasn't expecting that question. What have I learned from them?
Or what would other people find interesting to know? Like everyone listening, things that they might be surprised to learn about
them as like
athletes and how they move, and what kind of how they handle injuries if they get them. Anything that you might have specific knowledge on.
Yeah.
I mean, you sit at a table with these people for.
No, for sure. I'm just like, I don't want to like necessarily talk about their injuries if that's their own thing. So if they want to talk about that stuff, that's on them. But I think each of them, Travis, Noah, Alexis, Sarah, they have their own style of doing things. And I think we as coaches or physical therapists or physios, whatever your title is, I think you have to be willing to be moldable towards the athlete, and not everyone's going to do the same things, and they're not going to respond the same way, which is like obviously true of coaching, like strength training principles, sure. Right? You're not going to everyone's not going to back squat the same way or like be affected by back squatting in the same manner, or progressions, I should say. So watching all 4 of those people warm up is vastly different for them to execute on the same thing in very similar manners, right? They're all elite at what they do, and they're all really, really fit. But the way that they get there is very different. And I think you just have to be cognizant of like that. It doesn't have to be the same from athlete to athlete. And people who look the same probably don't need to do the same things either too. So it's just like making sure that you're matching outputs, I guess, to what the person really wants to do. I think that's probably like the biggest thing that I've learned from them, that they're all doing the same thing and they're all executing really well, but they all do it very differently.
Yeah. That to me is the most fun part of being a coach is trying to figure out what a specific athlete needs that will lead to their success. Yeah. Because again, to your point, in this sport, everyone moves differently and they warm up differently and they think differently and they all get the same point to the CrossFit Games. And people hate this, but I always think about golfers and how many different swings there are at the highest level of sport. The top 10 guys or top 10 girls in the world all swing so differently, but the ball gets to the same place every single time. And it's just, they have figured it out for themselves. And so the athlete needs to do that for themselves, but the coach also needs to be able to identify that and help them become as fruitful as possible in their endeavors.
For sure. And we're doing the movement course right now, and like one of the things is like self-mastery. It's just like they need to be masters of themselves in terms of like the way that they move and the way that they think about warming up and cooling down and their nutrition, and all those things like play into like their ability to like be an athlete.
Sure.
And I need to have all of us at Training Think Tank have to have a role in that ability to like help them learn what their self-mastery is so that they can be like the best athlete they can be.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about what you're doing right now. Obviously you're coaching, you have a ton of PT clients that you work on every day. I see you on consults all the time or out there with your table with an athlete. Yeah. But what are you doing for yourself? Like, do you have goals in either the sport of CrossFit, other hobbies that you're doing? Let the people know a little bit more about you.
Oh man, what am I doing beyond this?
Yes.
Yeah, I do all this all the time. This is all I'm doing right now. I'm not great at balance. I don't know if you have figured that out about me yet, but coaching, PT, helping with the movement course, helping with affiliate programming that's coming out right now, and then the movement and mobility stuff. So like that's honestly a large chunk of my time. When I'm going home, I am a learner. I don't feel like I know enough, and I'll probably never feel like I know enough. So like I'm taking courses right now. I'm currently reading a couple different books. So like when I go home, like I do a lot of that stuff, and my downtime is like walking my dog or like reading the books and like trying to sit in the sun and just like almost getting some down regulation away from all the stimulation. My job is very social by design. Like that's just the way that it is. So like I don't really necessarily seek out more social events just because like I like to like, okay, I need to like step back from.
You've been talking to people all day.
Yeah, like I'm talking to people. We're talking about training. We're talking about injuries. We're talking about like the progress that are coming down the line.
Don't let this motherfricker fool you. Tell him about the airport. Tell him about the airport, Kyle.
Okay. All right. Should I tell you about this story?
He says he's not social. Listen to this.
Okay. So Chris and I, where were we going?
I don't remember.
One of the semifinals of last year.
Something CrossFit.
Yeah, we were doing something CrossFit. I can't remember. And we were in, was it the Atlanta airport?
Airport. We had some time to kill.
Yeah, so we had like a big layover. I think we got delayed, I think is what happened. And we were both starving. So we tried to like find a restaurant, but of course, like we're delayed. Everyone's delayed. So we walk up and it's like, the lady's like, hey, it's going to be a 45-minute wait to sit at a table. God. And I was just like, all right, well, we're starving. So we sat down, we put our names on there, but we're just like killing time. And she starts shouting out at this name, and I don't know what overcame me, but I was like, "Yeah, that's me." And it was like an Asian name, or like it was like just not obvious.
Well, people hadn't answered for a minute, right?
Right. Yeah. She shouted it out, and like I just didn't like pop up, but like she said it enough where I was like, "They're not here anymore." You know what I mean? And it clearly like the name that was
said, everyone around us was doing the same thing and looking like, "Should we take it?"
Yes. The name that was said was not the name. Obviously, like didn't match me at all. But I was like, "Hey, that's me. Like we're ready to go." And she's like, "Oh, it's a table of 6 or what? Table of 6? I don't even remember anymore." But I was like, "Okay." So I look out into the crowd and I was like, "These 3 and those 2 and then this guy, we're that person. We're that party." And she looked at me. She goes, "Are you sure?" And I was like, "Yep." And then she took us in. So
wow,
we sat
with random people.
We sat with strangers
that were very talkative,
that somehow knew each other. It was wild. They were in the same town. They went to the same golf course.
It was brutal, dude.
It was.
I didn't want to talk to anybody.
Chris, he sat at the end of the table, and I could just feel him shifting over more and more and more. And I was just like, "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that I did this, but at least we're eating, I guess. I don't know."
I'm sure they loved you.
Guys, the point.
Yeah, they probably loved you for picking them.
Yeah,
and everyone else was probably pissed. What were the stares like?
Honestly, I just pointed at people, and I was just like, "All right, we're just doing this."
What sucked the most though is we were starving, and we had to get to our gate by a certain time, but they treated us like a single table.
Yeah.
So we all ordered the food, and instead of me and Kyle just getting our food when ours was ready, we had to wait for the whole family's table, and took longer than we wanted.
It definitely took longer.
At least you got your food.
Man, it was, I couldn't believe I did that. That was definitely not, it was definitely out of character for me.
Yeah, I don't think I could ever do that.
Yeah.
Kyle's also into a lot of metalcore.
Yep. Do we want to talk about it?
I don't even know what that
go
is.
for it.
Is this like...
it's music.
Oh, okay. So like Brooks then.
Not like Brooks.
Yeah, different than Brooks. So, okay, there's multiple genres. I don't know how deep we want to go into this, but I listen to metal primarily, so screaming music.
Okay.
And then there's genres off of that. Some of it's a sing scream duo guy. Sometimes it's a guy singing and screaming. That's just the genre of music that I listen to. So Chris and I share a lot of interest in music. We've gone to a show together, but we saw
Thrice, right?
We saw Thrice play. Yeah.
What's the difference between singing and screaming? Quite literally, they're singing,
literally,
and then they're screaming.
Literally screaming.
Can you do just a little rendition?
I definitely cannot. Yeah, there you go. That's basically what it sounds like, but it's actual screaming.
When they're screaming, I've wondered this: are they actually saying words, or are they just screaming? Yeah.
Are they actually saying words?
Yeah.
Get out of here.
I'm just saying, is it just them yelling into the mic, or
they're literally saying words.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would say I think most of them are saying words. Sometimes I'm sure there's just saying some noises just to fill space and make
ooh, wow.
Yeah, and make and make the music. You know what I mean? Because a voice is an instrument as well, obviously.
Sure.
So that's what I primarily listen to. But obviously, I don't ever get to play it at the gym because
do you ever play it at home? Do you play a guitar? Do you sing? Do you do any of that?
I wrote poetry for a really long time.
Oh, okay. You want to do one of those?
Yeah, I want me to do what's it called, a slam?
Poetry slam?
Yeah, poetry slam.
Did you ever do that?
No, I did not actually. I just wrote. I just liked. It was very wordy. That's just how I speak and think.
Did you ever offer your poetry to a band to use as lyrics?
I did not, but I really wanted to.
I was at one of my bands. We had a guy who all he did was write lyrics, and I just got to sing and do his stuff. I really liked that because I hated what I did.
That's cool.
I stole some kind of poem online and gave it to my 3rd grade girlfriend for Valentine's Day.
You remember what
it was
it
awesome.
said?
No, it was great.
Did you scream it to her?
Yeah, I did. Roses. Wow, you did great at that.
That's it right there. Except it's legitimately screaming, but that's what it sounds like.
Yeah.
You know what's funny though is there's a mixture. There's a mixture of people who legitimately did I say a word? I don't think I did.
You tried.
Who legit scream it.
Yeah.
And then other people who really do just cover it and go,
yeah.
And because it's amplified through PA speakers, you can't really tell.
Yep.
So I also hear that you only like one vegetable, and it's green beans.
Yes.
What's up with that?
They're just so good.
Wait, you only like one?
No. I don't only like the green beans.
He only eats green beans.
But I basically only eat green beans for my dinner and lunch.
How do you prepare them?
Roast them with sometimes it's just salt,
Okay.
salt, garlic, pepper, and then sometimes I throw some almonds on it when I'm feeling crazy.
Sliced or whole almonds?
Sliced.
Okay, yeah, I was gonna say.
Are you
whole,
like
whole
the legit green bean or what style?
Like a French green bean that you have to roast and stuff. Yeah.
You ever get the end of it where it has that little stick at the end and you weren't anticipating it and it ruins your whole lunch?
Yeah, it's sad.
You pop them off, right?
Yeah.
Or do you just cook them
No.
as is?
No.
That's the problem with green beans is you have to go through each one, pop it off, and just.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same thing with broccoli. If you're going to cut up broccoli, it's you got to cut off that huge stem. And
That's true, but I actually like a little bit of the stem. So when I make it, I'll cut
So you'll leave more on.
Kind of the nasty part off, but then I leave the thicker part because I don't know.
And does anyone just eat that whole broccoli? What would you call that part?
I actually don't mind it. It's just the very
bottom
I'm talking
where
about
it's
dirty.
The thick part.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I don't mind that. Is that weird?
You're talking about flowerets, though. You're talking about the end of like the little branch. I'm talking about that big ass piece.
Are you talking about like the broccoli heads?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will cut just the tip of that off and leave everything else and eat it.
That seems aggressive.
Yeah. What about Brussels sprouts?
I like
say Brussels and broccoli are my favorite.
Brussels are good.
Sure.
I like Brussels.
Yeah.
I just like
air fryer Brussels or where it's at.
I don't know if
I haven't done that
yet.
either. Yeah, usually we just roast them.
Yeah.
That just sounds great though.
Yeah, it's nice because you get that like that
A little bit
restaurant
of a
style crisp.
without all the like they just fry them and then you bite into it and it's just all oil in your mouth.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of that.
That's good.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
When it's like super oily.
Yep.
I do like it though with a little sriracha sauce on there or some other like spicy chili. Have you tried those?
Oh yeah,
That's the way to, man, so good.
I feel like people are going to be upset for the 3 people out there who do like that genre of music, and you didn't mention any of your favorite bands. So just give them like 2.
Every Time I Die has been my favorite band since I don't know. I was like 13. They're a band from Buffalo, but they're pretty like well recognized.
That's where you're from, right?
That's where we're from. Sorry. Yep. I used to really like Architects. They've kind of changed their style lately.
Oh, shots fired! Shots fired!
Shots fired. I know.
Why do you say that?
What if they listen to this, bro?
Yeah, they're never gonna listen to this. They're more like arena rock now. They've just kind of like they've started to get away from like the metal screaming.
So basically, they try to make more money.
Exactly. Yeah, they're trying to make more money. Trying to think of like I just got into this band called Grey Haven right now. It's really cool. It's a good blend of things. I really like Dillinger Escape Plan, Periphery. I really liked Thrice. There's a bunch of bands out there. I also listen to pop punk, so like State Champs. There's just like I don't know. It's a good.
We wanted to go to that Newfound Glory. What was it?
Furnace Fest. We're gonna go to Furnace Fest, and we're gonna go like see like Poison the Well play, Blindside. God, who else is there? Counterparts. I don't know. There was a ton of bands there.
How much money are those
Alexis
bands making?
Fire.
Nothing. Fucking nothing.
They're just like doing
the
it for the
bands we
love.
listen to don't make shit. They just get
they
to
don't
tour
make-
and do what they want.
Yeah.
Where do you find their music now? Is it just like on Apple iTunes or Spotify?
Yes.
Wonder how much do they get paid from
Nothing.
that?
Probably nothing, right?
It's like
I mean, they
a
get
cent
paid
per
something,
song.
but it's like it's not enough for 4 or 5 dudes to be making a living.
Yeah.
Man, I've
It
always
funds
wondered
them
that.
to tour maybe, and that's just to break even to pay for the hotel or the Airbnb or whatever and eat.
So it's literally for the love of music.
I think it's really
Very few bands are balling.
Yeah, they love it. I think they have to in order to do that.
Who is balling right now? Like what genre are the artists at the top making a lot of money?
Rap,
Yeah.
R&B.
Rap music.
I think like that genre. I think that's a huge, and like pop probably. Like those three are probably crushing it right now.
I mean, don't get me wrong. There's some metal bands who are balling, but
country is probably crushing it right now.
Yeah.
Especially like that pop country that's like
Well,
really
yeah, it's
popular
like
right
more
now. It's more like pop, but
popish now than anything else.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think there's really many metal bands. Maybe Slipknot. They might be the only one.
Yeah, but they got to divide it amongst 9 dudes.
Yeah.
One guy who doesn't even do anything.
That's shots fired.
You talked about country, and I saw this video of what's his name, Garth Brooks, and it's like a sold out football stadium.
Yes.
So there's got to be 80,000 people in there. He's got to be making a ton of money from that.
Dude, Luke Combs just sold out every show for his whole tour, all football stadiums. It's never been done before.
That's it. See, that's what I mean. Like that kind of person's
Instant
making a ton of money,
sellouts, I
right?
mean.
Yeah.
So what's a ticket? $100 or $50 to $100?
I don't know. I think Luke usually does pretty chill.
I'm not sure.
But still, 80,000 people.
He's crushing it.
Yeah.
That dude is so popular right now. It's unreal.
I wonder how much he has to pay. I guess people are touring with him, right?
Yeah,
So
he has probably like 2 full like haulers of like he probably has 2
like open air acts.
18-wheelers just to take the stage.
So he's
show.
paying all of those people.
Yeah.
Man,
It's crazy.
that's a big business right there.
Yeah,
but he's also selling a lot of songs. Like his albums are millions of downloads.
Yeah. I think he has 3 main albums.
That's another thing. Yeah, I don't know nothing about music, but I've thought about this before. You go, Chris, you've talked about this. You go into the music store when we were kids, and there's the CDs are in there, right? And everyone buys it, and whatever it was, $15, $12. Now no one's buying that. They're just buying the song, and the songs are what, like 99 cents on iTunes, or if you
They're not even doing that. They're subscribing to Spotify or Apple Music.
Spotify.
Okay, so then
all of them.
how do they then get paid for their music other than touring?
I think they're getting like a really, really small percentage.
I know that they're always negotiating to try to get more of that money, and I haven't looked into it in a while to see where they're at, but they get something.
Yeah.
It's just not a lot.
I mean, I wonder how much they were actually making from record sales or CD sales or album sales anyway.
Well, I guess the producers and the record label, they're making all the money.
Yeah.
But still, if you think $12, how much was a CD when we were kids?
12, 15.
Yeah, something
Man, I
like
remember
that.
walking into Best Buy and buying like all the bands that I listened to. Like
Right.
I just remember like saying, like, oh, this sounds like a cool band. I'm going to buy this album and see
you
what
would just
happens.
buy something just off the cover.
Like I found like Oh Sleeper because it said like for fans of like Under Oath and other things, and I picked it up and I was like, oh, this is really good. I never would have found
Wow, that's
this
some
band.
advertising. Right?
I
They
know.
put that on there?
Yeah,
I guess that's one way to do it.
They crushed it.
You know, maybe we should do that. Training think tank for
for fans of
maybe not say that.
yeah, I don't know.
Ice cream and
ice cream and intellectuals. I think that's it. Yeah, that's good.
All right, so let's finish this up talking about your CrossFit journey. Are you doing anything in the sport? Are you competing in anything right now?
I actually am competing in something, even though my training has been so low. So Perrin told me that I needed meaning to my training. So she said I should sign up for Pensacola Beach Brawl or Fittest of the Coast. So I'm doing the Fittest of the Coast qualifier.
Nice.
I'm doing it with Tracy, actually. We're doing like an intermediate team co-ed thing.
Sweet.
It's been fun. I literally haven't done a competition in, I don't know, since quarterfinals of, not this last year, 2 years ago, the first quarterfinals. Man, so it's been so long. It's just been fun. I have not been training. I've been putting way more time into being a better coach for my athletes and being a better physical therapist or physio for all the people that I work with, whether they're like on-site or virtual. So I feel not fit, but I still have it when I need to pull it out. Like I just did a workout that maybe will come out, I don't know, with Alexis, Allison, Hannah Hardy, and Ashley Wozniak. And it was 500 meter row, 1K bike erg, 500 meter row, and I paid for that so hard.
Well, that's like a sprint.
It was, I went like 138, 144, 139, and just completely collapsed on the ground. There was nothing. Yep. I tried to get up multiple times and just like went right back to the ground. Man, like everything hurt. Quads, biceps, lats. I was just like, nothing is comfortable right now.
I think that's the worst spot to be in is when you are still fit enough to dig deep, but you haven't been training to have the base that you can recover quickly, and then you just are wiped out at the end of that.
Perrin was like, oh, you did a good job. I thought you were going to fall off. And I was like, yep. And she's like, we don't do that. And I was like, I know we don't do that. I was like, I am hurting right now from that.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Kyle, for coming on. And how can people follow you?
They can just follow me on Instagram. It's just my name, Kyle Habdo, or they can go to Training Think Tank and just follow along there.
Yeah, I think that if for those that, because there are people all over the place that are probably hurting, they can go to trainingthinktank.com and look into some consults with you as well.
Yep, I do free consults, just like a 20-minute like discovery call. If that's something that you want to get into, we can just talk about things, and I can give you some pointers or some guidelines, or we can get more into it. And if like you want to get more into it, then we can set up some like further like consults and whatnot.
Sweet. And you write the, what are y'all calling it? Movement mobility path?
Movement and mobility.
Yeah, the movement mobility path. It's kind of like taking some iterations, but I don't know. It seems like it's been really effective. I know that there's people in the program that have had.
This is part of TTT Compete and TTT Fitness.
Yeah. It's part of both the programs, the TTT Compete.
So you would follow, so for people out there, it's like part of our programs, but no matter what path in our program you're following, you can do this path in conjunction with it, right?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. Yep. So how would people use it?
I think probably most people use it as a cool down. That's probably my most that's probably the easiest way for people to use it. Now, if we kind of go back to things that we were talking about, it's like people who don't have good movement patterns, like they probably want to use it on the front side of their session.
Yeah.
But then we're talking about time and like energy, like allotment or whatever that you have for the day. So for most people, they probably just use it as a cool down and a way to like kind of like down regulate or like get some parasympathetic drive and just kind of like chill out. Some people probably really need to do it on the front side of their session, but that's kind of for like them to decide. But yeah, if you follow both those programs, like you're going to get access to both of that. It's been really effective. I know a bunch of your clients because they tell me use it all the time, and they have found a lot of benefit.
Yeah, I deliver it to all of my clients, so they have access to that, or they can just choose it on their rest days too. Yeah. That's what a lot of people in TTT Compete will do. They'll do like a Thursday and a Sunday because they have more time, obviously, on the off days.
For sure.
Or people will mix and match. I think that's a cool thing about having something like that, where you're not having to go outside of our online programs to find another movement course or another, whatever to follow. Yeah. You can stay in there, do all your training and all your mobility work, and a lot of that is going to help you not only move better, but recover after sessions or get into better positions before the session.
Yeah. Speaking of having to find a movement course, when is that coming out? Is that soon? Are y'all almost done?
We just finished the first chapter of that.
Okay. So
there's gonna be 3 chapters. We finished the first one. It's getting reviewed right now. And then that will come out hopefully before the end of the year. Like our goal is to like do a course every 3 months. I was going to say something before we turned away from the movement course or the movement path. Man, escaped me. Yeah.
I will say this. I've reviewed a little bit of the, the first chapter, and it's awesome. It's a huge upgrade from what we had in the past. And so it's definitely worthwhile for those coaches that are interested in just the concepts of movement.
Yeah, who's it for? Coaches or athletes?
I think for both. I as a coach, it's very helpful for me to be able to communicate with my athletes the things that I'm thinking about, how they can move better. But for the athlete that wants to take their training to the next level, it's also really important that they understand, to Kyle's point earlier, about their own body, and they can start identifying the things that they can self-master.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. Honestly, I took the original movement course when Max put it out forever ago, and it was like 17 hours. Who knows how long this one's going to be? Maybe around the 10-hour mark. But man, it feels it's like more upgraded and more practical, where before it was definitely a lot of more philosophical. So I'm excited to see how it comes out. And I remember what I was going to say now. It is cool to have the movement path inside the program because you don't need those extra subscriptions. Yeah. And those extra subscriptions were a lot of rehashments from things that had already been out in the market. Like basically people took Kelly Starrett's like Becoming a Supple Leopard book and they just like put it into an app. And I didn't see people getting changes from that. I talked to a lot of people that at least didn't get changes from it. Now, whether they were consistent or not, I have no idea. But it seems like people are more receptive to the things that we're doing in here. And then it's not to like toot our own horn. I think it's just they're actually putting the time in to do the things. And it's easy to do it because it's literally right there.
I agree.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks, Kyle.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.